So today we're going to look at the fascia system. We want to know, what is the fascia, the fascial system. I want to give you a kind of sense of seeing, feeling, and working with the fascia of the body. As a yoga practitioner, you won't necessarily be doing so much manual therapy. So, it's a little different than what I'm bringing to the table, but it doesn't mean that you can't utilize a lot of the tools I utilize. So I use seeing, I use feeling a lot. I study the way people walk a lot when I'm looking at the fascia system. And that's a really important thing. I study the way someone's standing, so I can see if I put the framework of the Tensegrity system on top of the fascial system, and I'm looking at someone, then I can look for, we touched on this last night just a little bit, what part of their body might be what I might call like tight short. To me, that's a really important part of the body. Yeah. Do you remember last night we were talking, we had that toy?
Yeah.
And we did a little demonstration where we contracted one little part and we called that tight short. Do you remember that? Oh, did everyone hear that question? Probably not. Let me repeat it. So the question was like, what's tight short, essentially? What just to rehash. Yeah, from Latin. And so last night, near the end of the talk, Michelle had that toy and we compressed one end of the tensegrity structure and we called that tight short. That might be like an adhesion in the structure. And then if you can get one of those toys, you'll get more of a tactile sense for it. But the rest of the tensional network increased as we made that section shorter. And so that increase in tension elsewhere can be concentrated in certain parts. And that would be what I'd call more like tight long. And so this is, we might be in a balanced neutral state, something adheres. So we have something shortening in our body, and then something else gets pulled long. And so that's what we're talking about sometimes when we're looking for that kind of pattern in the body. If someone's standing and we're overlaying this tensegrity concept on the structure. Yeah. And that speaks to that relationship of fascia and tensegrity in our body. So that's that idea. And it could be anywhere. So let me go into it a bit more. I'm going to stand. So another way of thinking of that, like when I'm looking at a body, so you can start doing that. So if it's moving or not moving, it can be helpful it's moving, but what we're looking for, there's another way of saying, if there's something adhered, is like the body will hug the adhesion, the body will hug the lesion. The body, if something is tight short, for whatever reason, it could be an important reason, like it's got something to do with an injury, an organ structure. The body will want to comfort that area, so it will put ease into that area. So if I strained my hip flexor for whatever reason, or got some injury in the front here, I might start folding in to that area of my structure to put it in ease, particularly if there was an artery involved in that injury. And so then when you see someone standing like this, I may not even complain about this area because it's in ease. If it was like this, it might be very painful, but my body says, no, that's too important an area. I don't want you to do that. So the body, the nervous system, everything will shorten around that area that's injured. And if I'm standing like this, can you see what's getting pulled tight long? My back, my left hip, and then if I started to walk like this, right? This is an exaggeration. Well, people do have this level, right? And I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, please, I need to roll out this area, right? It's so sore, the muscles are so tight, right? But really, and that's true. It is true. We need to treat this area, but it won't really do anything for the structure until this area feels safe enough to get its length back. And then we have the ease. And so you can see that with people standing, you can see that with people walking. If someone's walking, what you'll see, or what you could look for, you can ask yourself the question, what is not moving? What is not involved with that person where they're walking? And so sometimes someone will have lower back pain here. Instead of having the, I don't know if I can do this here, if I'm walking here, instead of having nice contralateral movement, they might have all of this still, or they might keep the upper body still as they're walking so that there's no movement in that area. Again, trying to put ease, trying to put stillness in the area that's under threat.
So what would you look at in that case? If their low back is sore and they're walking without their shoulders?
So the question is, what would I look at if the low back is sore and they're walking without their shoulder movement? I'd really have to see an example, because that's where the details matter. And so what I try and encourage for people is not to put someone into a certain box, because it's very, very personal. And when I work with the fascia, that's what I find. To me, it's more like when you're working with the fascia, it's more like a key and a lock. If you can get it just right, if you can meet the pattern, the strain pattern perfectly, then everything will start to unwind well. If you don't, that's when you need to use a lot of force. The exception to that is scar tissue. When scar tissue is really, really bound up, then it's not necessarily force, but you do need a lot of manual input into the scar tissue, because it's not as, probably because it doesn't have the same innervation feedback loop. And so then it does need more. But case by case is how I treat it. So that's that, we came in with that question of inquiry. So when you're seeing someone, you're seeing a client, it's like, what's happening for you? And I think that's really important. And if you can open to that, because one person might present similar to another person, but one person had an emotional reason for the holding. Another person might have tripped on a step. Another person might have done something else, and you could call all of that low back pain, but they are different. And so that's really, really important. Someone else might have a extra lumbar vertebrae, we just don't know. And these are the questions we want to ask. And the more accurate we can get with what we see, the body really likes that. Yeah. It wants to feel heard. So the nervous system wants to feel heard. We want to feel heard. Who doesn't want to feel heard, right? And so the body is like that. So when it really feels heard, then it goes, let me tell you about it. This is what's happening. And then everything can unwind more easily. Okay.
So do you find you can really get a better picture when someone's walking versus standing, or is it a bit of both?
You can use different tools. I like to, thank you. So the question was around, is one method of seeing the body more effective than another method, right? I like to use as many as I can, is my answer. So I try to get as much information as I can. So I might see, I might feel in my body how I feel when I look at someone. And then I want to touch, in the yoga context, that's a little trickier. Sometimes we were talking about energy. We had a question on energy. That's something that it's hard to even say what that is. I mean, we have the classic definition of energy, but I can see a body, and it's like if my eyes are soft, I can see that there's no flow in a leg or something, that looks short, but it's not like a physical, I can measure this and it's short. It's more like a felt sense. So that's more energetic in its quality. But that, I think the research hasn't caught up with the energy piece yet with the fascia, but that's an element of it. Yeah, so I try to get as much information as I can. Yeah, and make sure the person feels comfortable. So I don't want to laser eyes them, right? And bring them out in front of everyone. And I don't want to say, oh my God, right? So It's being, you know, careful, and, you know, you want that natural, you want to see what they're doing naturally too, right? And then what I also find helpful is I'll talk and I'll try and get information of what's happened. So often when I'm getting close to a pattern of the fascia on the body, and this is where it gets really interesting, when I'm getting close to something really important, they will start telling me a story, or they will remember something about what we're working on that they didn't tell me before. And when that communication opens up, that's like, oh, and now it's all coming together. And there's a sense, a tactile sense, like now I'm making contact with the whole pattern. And now we can work it rather than a piece of a pattern. So like, it's like the fascial adhesion has a story, is kind of like that. Again, we don't have the science to back up what I'm saying here, but that's my experience. Yeah. Okay. Raised hand, Inga.
When you stood up and when you were showing like a different posture, it just reminded me also of like a typical physical fitness kind of posture assessment, right? When people talk about muscles, where the muscles are tense, where they're long, which muscles we have to work, which muscles we have to lengthen or stretch. So from a fascia perspective, then it would be more when a person comes already with some kind of like pain or maybe after an injury, right?
They could come for any reason. Yeah, some people come just because they want to they feel good and they just want to get better, like even improve on that.
Okay. And then one more question. Is there any similarity between
sorry,
your work and what would like a physiotherapist would do? Or is there anything similar, or how different are the approaches?
Physiotherapists, you know, I'm not a physiotherapist, of course, but a physiotherapist will often focus on what muscles don't have enough tone. So that's a lot of their focus. The big thing here is fascia is like the medium. I think that's like huge. Fascia is like the medium for communication, because what gets missed a lot is I don't know if you'd call it hierarchical. I guess you could. Different systems of the body have more importance to the body than other systems. So the arterial system, the organ system, are very, very important to the body. Very important. The musculoskeletal system, not as important as those other systems. So if we're framing everything around the musculoskeletal system, we say, hey, this muscle's not firing, or this muscle's doing this. If there's another system involved, there's a impingement on an artery, there's a nerve strain, there's no way the body's going to do what you're asking it to do from a musculoskeletal perspective if it's not addressing the problem that's happening on another level that's more important. So the body will often sacrifice the musculoskeletal structure in order to put ease into another system of the body, which is what I was demonstrating in my hip. I was hugging the hip. So that's the musculoskeletal system being compromised because there's something within that hip structure that was more important. It might have been deep in the joint, right? So when we're looking for a musculoskeletal change, we can work with it directly, and it does work. But we need to keep our awareness open that there's not something that's more important that has to happen first. Yeah. And so then when we look at the fascia, bring it back to the fascia is this medium, which is what Schleifer said. And I think that makes a lot of sense because the fascia has the ability to contract over time. The fascia has the ability to constrict the vascular system. The fascia has ability to affect the immune system. The fascia has ability to get involved with the organ system, with the way the organs are held or move or slide. The fascia will be, you know, it's the most innervated system in the body. It's going to be involved with any kind of nerve impingement. So whatever's happening on these systems of more importance, the fascias are usually involved. And yeah, so you know, what's happening in the musculoskeletal system? You know, when we look at something like emotions, it's huge, right? Or if we look at movement habits or any of these things, they can be affecting it. So there's definitely a place for strengthening the muscles, absolutely, and putting things through correct range of motion, absolutely. And we just need to keep our awareness a little broader, so we're not missing something obvious that's really important. Okay, Polly, yeah.
Hi, Moni. So when you talk about you found out the cause about the injuries, the client can be remember things. It reminds me, fascia has memory as well, right? That's why when you touch the core reason, they will remember things by fascia or something. And my another question is, how do you approach to the client when they tell you, I couldn't do, for example, I couldn't do cross leg, I feel so pain on my left leg, and normally we will focus on that area. How will you approach any question? Will you ask for you to understand more?
Can you give me that example that you said? I missed the last part of your question.
Yeah. I mean, if someone tell you that I couldn't cross the leg because I
I
feel
couldn't
so
cross the leg. Okay, yeah. Okay.
I feel pain on my hip, left hip, something like that. So normally we will treat that part to
Right.
release that part. So from yesterday and today, your presentation is talking about that maybe not
Yeah.
the main reason why, because
Yeah.
it's extended, you will feel pain. That's why you feel
Yeah.
pain. So what's your approach or any question for you to find out which part is the main reason to cause the painful? And do you have any real situation can be shared so that I can be more visual about what's your theory talking about?
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's too long.
Good question. I'll try to remember. So the memory, we don't have, I don't know of any science for the memory, but it's got to tie in with the innovation, I'm guessing. But it seems like I just see it all the time. So I've felt, I've been on tissue and then suddenly I might, you know, start crying or something. Like I feel an emotion as I touch the tissue. So there's something there. There's something with the way that nervous systems can react, respond or connect with each other. And it can be such a localized area. It's just amazing. I can be like, fine. It's like, oh, I feel pain, but it's not my pain, but I'm feeling pain. Often when I'm touching, I can feel like the nerves, if they're unhappy, they go, zzz, they're buzzing. There's a buzzing quality to them. And then once they settle down, then they get quiet again. So there's a lot of activity that I don't think we've really got all of the science behind that I see day to day in the office. But it's definitely there in my experience. In terms of the hip example that you gave with crossing the legs, it comes back to what I was talking before. I'll try and get information from as many points of view as I can to just stay open. So, you know, maybe you start talking and they cross their legs like that every day at work the other way. You know, if they're always crossing their legs the other way, that's gonna, or if they're meditating and one hip's higher than the other, you know, and it's a chronic pattern. So what are they doing in their life, right? So there's sometimes just there's something someone's doing that's causing the pattern, and they just not have the consciousness that action that they're doing is causing that pattern. It's a little bit like detective work. So as I'm dialing in, I'm asking myself questions, I'm asking them questions, I'm using touch, I'm using felt sense. I start with the premise that everything's connected. We just don't know like how much one thing's relating to another. And I also start with that premise, is there something of a higher order priority that's influencing something like the pain in the leg as it crosses, you know? So it's really a case by case. So it's less like, oh, if someone can't cross their leg, look for A, B, and C. For me, it doesn't really work that way. It's really a case by case. If I see it, I'll start to look for like, oh, show me, you know, I might be like, show me you crossing your leg where it hurts. And then I'll look for what's not moving, right? Maybe when they go to cross their leg, there's no rotation in the lumbar spine or something like that. So that's where, when I'm looking for what's still, that could be useful. I could ask them to do the motion, or not to do it to pain, but just to start the motion to see, you know, A, what's getting in their way, and then B, what's not involved in the motion. So it can be like that. I hope that speaks to that question. It could really come from anywhere. So you were asking for an example. So I'll give you one example that just came to mind, which illustrates all this. It's treating a client who long-term back pain, no one can figure it out. Worked with them for a while. When I did my, so one thing I do, and I haven't talked about this yet, so this is something new. When I work with people, I'll touch them and I'll feel for their tensegrity structure through touch. And then I'm feeling for what's tight short and what's tight long. I'm feeling for that. So just like Michelle squeezed the tensegrity ball, I do that with a very light touch when I touch someone. And so I did that with this client, and they're saying, it's here, it's here, it's here, right? Back pain. And I'm like, why is your big toe like coming up? You know? And I've done this long enough to trust my feeling. It's like, I have no idea why your big toe is showing up as I scan. I call it a scan, but I'm doing that tensegrity touch. It's like, so I'm touching their head. I'm like, why can I feel your toe? What's the big deal? Like, why is that? And so I start working with the toe, and then they start to remember the story. And they said, oh, just before I hurt my back, I hit my toe on the curb. And then I lifted the thing and I hurt my back. Right? So I work the toe. No one's worked the toe. 10 years, no one has worked her toe. So I work the toe. And what it does it take care of the back pain? No, it didn't take care of the back pain. But what it did is it opened up the pathway so we could eventually get to the back pain. And I don't think we would have got to the back pain if I hadn't opened up the toe line. And what it was there was a nerve on the toe that was entrapped. And that was feeding all the way up. It influenced the back pain. Like when I worked the toe, it influenced the back pain straight away. But we didn't get full resolution until we worked another structure deep in the belly. But it took a while for that to show up. And what I want to speak to now, because we're giving this example, is I did not see the structure that was involved in the back pain until about the 6th session. And then when I did see it, it was as clear as day. It was so obvious. And I see this all the time. It's like something, if it's not ready, if it's not available, if it doesn't have the resources to be worked on, it's like a ghost. It can be totally invisible. Yeah, exactly. Wasn't feeling safe, right? And so by the 6th session, I saw the pattern that was causing the back pain, and it was so clear. It was so obvious. It was subtle, but it was still like, oh yeah, of course that's the pattern. And then we worked that, and then the back pain resolved. Okay. So all those factors were involved. Even time was involved. So if I'm working an area of fascia, and this is something you don't see on the slides, and we don't talk about it a lot, you can work an area, or like in yoga, you may do an intervention on an area, and then you can leave it for 30 seconds or a minute. And then that area will improve over that short period of time because now there's fluid flow. So if I have an area that's not responding or responding a little bit, I might work it for a bit, and it's like, let me give you 30 seconds. Let me give you a minute. Let me go somewhere else a little bit. And then let me see. Oh yeah, good. Now there's some more room for me to work on. So it's definitely, even if we see an area that we feel is like at the root of something, we don't want to necessarily poke it, prod it, go after it, not give it any space. Like that doesn't really work. So what you can do is you can do a little intervention through your yoga therapy, and then give it a little space, and then ask the question again, how's it going now? You know, and if you see an improvement, what's really good when you're working with the fascial system is if you can support the fascial system or the adhesion, whatever we're working with, up to the point where the body can start to self-regulate that area. So it's rarely about getting an area 100% improved.
Michelle always says, allow the fascia to let you in.
Allow the fascia to let you in. Yep, absolutely. So you're going at the pace of the change of the fascia. And also, don't try and do all the work. You're trying to just create enough there, enough knowledge, enough intelligence so that the fascia can finish the job. I will never get the same level of integration in the fascia that the fascia can do itself. Those last little bits are up to, it's like an inside job. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And that's what I really wanted to do, is share this as much as I can. Just this, the actual, the felt sense. What is it like working with the fascia? And we'll keep going over what it is.
Thanks.
Great. I've got a question from Linda, and I have a question from, I wasn't watching who asked first, Julia. Okay. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Yeah, I'm jumping in,
Julia.
sorry. So we talked about these lines, these fascia lines as well. And I was wondering if I understood it correctly, that like along these lines, it's more likely that the body would compensate with like shortening and lengthening, because it's all connected, isn't it? So, but there's like a stronger connection along the lines.
It's a really good question. And so you're asking whether we would see a predominance of adaptation along the line, the fascial lines in the Tom Myers book.
Yeah.
On an individual basis, I don't see that so much, because the reasons why people have things are so different from each other. And so it's more like, what was the situation? Even if two people were in a car crash and they got, you know, it's like, what was the angle of the car? Where was your head during that impact? It's like, there's so many variables involved, and the fascia is just going to take in what actually happened. So the fascia is going to feel the force of whatever happened for that injury, or whatever caused some sort of adhesion. And it's just such a unique thing. And the fascia can adapt. So different people will adapt differently to an injury. So I see so much variation. It's really hard for me to say, oh yes, it will, you know, if it's here, it's going to follow that line across. It's really hard for me to say. I'd like to tell you that, but I don't see that so much. Because things can go left or right, like patterns, like adaptations. But there's general principles involved. So generally, we need to be upright. So if there's a general principle where if something's shortened in the body, it will create a rotation. And if there's something shortened and rotated, something else in the body needs to rotate the other way so we don't fall over. Right? So if you see someone through their, they got an adhesion, just say they got a little bit of strain. Maybe they fell on their head, but the head was a little twisted. And so they got a strain, like in the back of the neck here. And so they get a little short here in their body. I'll exaggerate. So as soon as I do that, you could try this in your own body. As soon as I do that, I feel the strain, the long, tight coming in here. And so what I might do is start, but now I need, if I'm like this, the body really wants the eyes to be straight. So I might need to bring my head back, but look at my right shoulder now, right? And then, I know this is a lot. And then if this is higher, you know, it could come from anywhere and go anywhere. So then I might figure out one adaptation where I do something in my hip down here to kind of get balance so that I'm feeling like I'm, but now I've got to figure out something in my knee. So I probably need to, if this hip's high, now I need to bring this knee hyperextended or something, right? And I need to flex this knee to make it all work. But someone else might have an injury similar to this, but they have a different adaptation pattern. And that's the point I want to try and make. It's not going to be the same from person to person. And if you go in and you say, oh yeah, I know what's going on for you, you're going to miss what's actually happening for that person. Well, you might. So that's my point with that one. But yeah, usually if there's a adhesion, then it's going to be, if I'm short here, I'm going to rotate a little too. I didn't show you the rotation. So I'm short, it's going to pull me around. So now I have a rotation and a side bend. So if I rotate back, that's not going to really work for me. So now I have to rotate this part because I'm trying to be forward. And then I have to rotate this part. And I have to rotate this part, right? So, you know, that's what happens. In a larger example, that we see that with a scoliosis, but some people will have a simple scoliosis, like a simple curve. Other people will have 2, 3 curves, right? So that's where I'm saying different people have different adaptations to an input. I think what's really common is that the sacrum, you know, we fall as a kid. The sacrum is meant to go like in a sort of diagonal nutation, counter nutation movement, so forward and backwards, but with a diagonal movement. We hit our coccyx, which is, you know, our little tail. It gets bent to the side. Now the sacrum only goes one way, right? I think this happens a lot. The sacrum's only going to go one way. The lumbar spine only goes that one way. And so now we're like, nice clunk, nice clunk. And then we put 20 years on that, right? We don't see it as a kid because we're flexible and adaptable. Then we come adults, it's like, oh, my hip's sore now, or my back's sore, or something sore. Feet, that happened like a long, you know, I think it's very common. Like I don't meet many people that haven't fallen on their coccyx. And I don't meet a lot of people, you know, that won't have something happening with their sacrum. And that, anything that happens with the pelvis generally amplifies up the body. So, you know, there's a lot of systems out there when you think about it, you know, some, like there's chiropractor says, it's all in the neck, you know, and someone else say, no, no, it's all in the feet. And someone else will say, no, no, it's all in the hips, right? And I just find it just can be anywhere for anyone, and certain areas are going to be higher priority than others. So I just try to keep an open view, but I like to say it's all in the fascia. It's not. I'm just joking. Okay, and Linda?
I have a question. It's about language, actually. So you mentioned that the word treatment. So like, I don't know if your profession, is it like a medical profession, and are we allowed to use the word treat? And the reason why I'm asking it is because I'm also studying Ayurveda with an Ayurvedic school with teachers. It's in the United States, but we've been specifically told that we're not allowed to use the word treatment because Ayurveda is not considered a medical profession in North America. So I wonder if this is like the same in Canada, and in terms of like, you know, with as a yoga therapist, or would we be allowed to use the word treatment, or is there a caution around that?
That would be a really good question to ask Michelle later today. She's going to be far more qualified than I am to answer that question. I'm using the word more casually in this teaching, just so I can, you know, describe my experiences with working with people. but technically, if you're looking for a technical answer on whether you're allowed to use that word or not in practice for yoga therapy, then Michelle's going to be the one that can answer that.
Okay, but for your profession, are you allowed to use it?
I'm not like under benefits here, so I'm a manual therapist.
Okay.
Because I'm dealing one-on-one with people, I don't really need to use any language. Like people come and I ask them, what can I help them with? Or what's troubling them? I don't say, come in here for my treatment. Like it's not the same. It's more one-on-one dialogue. I'm not covered under benefits in this area. So I'm not the same as like a registered massage therapist. I'm not the same as a physio. They're going to have more, technical constraints around what to use and what not to use.
Interesting. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So strolling under the skin. This is that video we saw. Everyone love that? Yeah. And did you see, so what really struck out with me with this one was the way that the organization could change dynamically. And that's when we hold the idea of Tensegrity and we look at those fixed points of contact for the struts. In biology, those points are changing dynamically and very quickly, depending on what the body's experiencing. And strolling under the skin really showed how that worked. And so you got the different points of contact sliding and gliding and rearranging themselves in a lattice, looking to like minimize maximize the strength for the amount of input that they're providing, I guess. And so whenever we're doing any kind of manual therapy, whenever we're rolling on a ball, whenever we're doing any kind of movement, this is what's happening underneath. It's this amazing negotiation that's happening. It's far more complex than we could ever follow with our mind. So pretty cool video. So if we look at connective tissue generally, and we'll take a break after a slide or two. It's what we talked about before. It's made of essentially cells, fibers, and what we call a ground substance, which is the stuff surrounding the cells and the fibers, providing the nutrients, removing any of the excess material it needs to remove. The cells that we have in connective tissue generally include the fibroblasts, the adipocytes, the chondroblasts, the osteoblasts, the mesenchymes. For the fascia, we're going to be really mostly interested in the fibroblasts. So that's the main cell that makes the collagen and the elastin that we're interested for fascia. When I talk about connective tissue, that includes all the connective tissue in the body. So that includes the bones and the cartilage. And so some of these cells, like the chondroblasts, will be making the cartilage, and then the osteoblasts will be producing bone. So it's the point I'm trying to make here is the connective tissue all is made up of the same stuff. And really it's just the proportions of the stuff and the type of cells involved, which will change the function of that connective tissue. So for the fascia, we have mostly fibroblasts, and then we have the collagen and the elastin as the fibers. And then we have that ground substance, which is allowing all that slide and glide as well. So it allows the fibers allows everything to move. And so in the fascia, even in the fascia, when we look at the different types of fascia, the proportion of, so if you look at, say, something like the tendon, that's going to have a lot of collagen fibers in it. So a little bit less elastic, but very, very like, this is my direction. This is the way I'm going. If you look at another type of fascia in the body, then it may have fibers that are going, they might call it irregular, but it's actually regular with different layers. So like some fibers might go like this, and then the next layer down, they might go like this. and then the next layer down, they might go like this. And so we get a lot of those fibers and that kind of set up with the fascia, which creates strength in every direction. So all throughout the body, all throughout the fascia network, different proportions of the cells, the fibers, and the ground substance will produce a different type of fascia that's used for a very, specific purpose.
Brett, I have a question.
Yes.
So, since you're talking about how it will be in different proportions, I remember during the documentary they also spoke about, the hydration and how the water binds. So, is the proportion in with respect to the water also different? The way that
The different proteins will be different. The proportions of that can change. And then the proportion, like adipose tissue, or that's going to be more just ground substance. So it's going to be really just a ton of that ground substance and not a lot of structure. And you see that, it doesn't have a lot of structural integrity.
right.
But you could
Okay,
still
so
put that in.
So it's based on that functionality of that tissue. Is the proportion is sort of based on its functionality.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes, it's quite remarkable that you can take something reasonably simple and change the proportions to get all the different functions. It's actually pretty amazing.
Right, it is. Thank
Yes.
you.
That's one of the proteins in the ground substance. Yeah. So the question was, what about the hyaluronic acid? And so that's in the ground substance. That's that slide and glide. There's other ones in the ground substance. I'm not really great with all the details and of all the proteins. It's a little over my skill set. So then when we're dealing with the fascia, I like to think of it, the fascia is the soft connective tissue. That's how I think of it. So then we're not dealing with bones. We're not dealing with, cartilage proper. Fascia is everything else, and it wraps everything else. So that's my general. It took a while. People were trying to figure out, what do we call fascia? Do we include, superficial fascia, deep fascia, regular, irregular, adipose? So this is a definition that's a nice general definition that helps me think of that. I mean, everything, all of this is innervated as well. The primary fascia that we're dealing with in this is going to be the superficial fascia, and then the deep fascia or dense fascia. That's the primary ones that we're going to be really looking to influence. Okay. Okay. So it's 10 o'clock now. Why don't we take a break? I'm just going to leave this up. And do you want 15 minutes? Is that how long you normally break? So it's just before what is it, 10:04. Why don't we come back at just before 20 past, so 15 minutes from now, and we'll just go on from there. Okay, thank you.
It's like a substitute teacher, right?
Yeah, right. The only thing is, you only have me for a little bit of time. So.
I know.
In the past, I've made the mistake of just going and going and going, and everyone's like, oh. Yeah. So, yeah. Perfect. Great. Did I?
Slides are different than what's in the Dropbox.
Okay. Just the last, I added one today, which was the last one. Everything else should be the same.
Oh. Just looking here.
Okay, thank you.
Because this is where
We've tweaked it a little bit in the past.
because this is
Yeah, with
what's
that one.
loaded
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
here,
yeah.
and then this is where it becomes different.
Yeah, I'm going to go to that. Yeah.
So there's a few that you haven't.
Just
that
a
I guess
couple,
are
yeah.
not. Okay.
They're not.
So
I just added one, even the connective tissue one I just added today, just as connective tissue and then fascia.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is all in it. Yeah, that one.
It is. Yeah.
It's just that couple. Yeah.
Okay. So will you upload the new updated version or
No, we
give it
could.
to
Yeah,
Michelle?
I think, yeah, it's probably important, isn't it? It's just a couple of things.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let me make a note.
It's so big, Rolfing is your.
Is my, yeah, that's right. That's all I do, Rolfing. I'm like a savant. All I know is the fascia.
Then the difference between like, rolling, to get into the connective tissues, the ball rolling, right? The body.
Now, this is a question we should share with everyone. So let's take a note. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
And then rolling,
Yeah.
the difference. So maybe we'll, put that question.
And if I was going to form a question around that, is like, what's the difference between rolling on a ball and doing manual therapy? Yeah.
Does it impact the body differently? I don't know.
Well, rolling on the, it's a great question, because if you look at someone, like, I guess you've seen the people in the gym where they have the hard roller and they're just muscling through and they're like, oh, and they got that expression on their face. Oh, like they're putting information into the fascia. No question, they are. But that is so different to someone that's got an air ball. They've loaded the fascia, they're sitting with it, they're letting their nervous system communicate back and forth. They're doing little micro changes.
Right.
So that's like, one way is like, I'm a CSA security guard and I'm telling you what to do. And the other way is like, I'm a counselor. Let's figure out what's going on here. So there's a dialogue happening. And so the ball can be as good as the communication that's happening around that. So you can go far with that. When I'm doing it, it's going to be more specific with my hand, because I've got control of the 3 dimensions. So X, Y, and Z. So I can surround. With the ball, it's more, you can kind of get that, but you won't have the 2 points. You have 1 point of contact.
So are you actually applying the pressure, or is the client applying the pressure to their own body?
No, I'm doing pressure.
I'm
a manual therapist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So complete. We're not touching the clients, so their client's doing their own ball rolling.
If the client was doing their own ball rolling, yeah.
Yeah, in a
yoga therapy, you're not going to go in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the sad things about yoga that's come here, is we've gotten very careful about touching each other.
Right.
We've gotten so careful about so many things that we're maybe missing stuff because of our care, right? It's like, of course you want to be respectful, and I am always, but it's like there's the intention of it, right? And then there's the format of it. And if the format's so structured, then we can, it didn't always be like that. And there's good reasons to both, like you've probably heard all the stories where people got adjustments in yoga and it was a bad adjustment. And, so there's reasons for it. Yeah. But you can go far with ball rolling. With fascia, you can go very far with it. And I really like that the balls are soft.
Yes, yeah.
And so this would be a great thing to come back into.
In the squash balls there, just to get underneath, right? Just tell me a little bit more about your role there. Yeah. So
Rolfing is a direct manual therapy. So we're manipulating the fascia directly. And so sometimes when someone has an adhesion or a problem, it's like a lack of communication in the body. So it might be hard for you to bring the communication into an area if you have a proprioceptive, numb spot, right? And so as a rolfer, I have more opportunity to feel and say, no, something's happening, and really help create a lot more support about creating that information, that communication. Sometimes when I'm working, it's quite physical. So it's like, oh no, you have an adhesion, let's work it up. Oh, it's good, right? Other times it's much more subtle. So when I'm treating someone, I'm just meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
And so it can be from here to here, right?
Similar to the yoga therapy.
I guess so, yeah.
In that
You remember like when you said like you touch like client,
Yeah,
and then the spot might
yeah, be somewhere else.
somewhere
Yeah,
else.
that's a scan,
So
yeah.
is that more of an intuition based,
A what?
intuitive? So
Intuitive.
Is that intuitive or
I find it like physical.
okay?
Intuition is a tricky word for me.
Okay.
Because I think it's just subtle or sensitive. Intuitive is more like a gut.
But how could we know like
How can you train that?
yeah, the inside you? I guess you need to train your own mind and muscles to recognize that this is
I think, yes, such a good question. I think we should bring a little bit of that up, because I think what started for me, is I had to get awfully honest with myself. So early in my career, I had to really be honest. Am I actually affecting change that's actually positive or not?
I think so. This aligns with the Yoga Sutra also, no? Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Ahimsa and
yes,
Niyama
yes,
and all those things.
to observe and restrain. Yeah.
To be
They have to
truthful to yourself.
You
is
have to be
also-
honest. That was the first thing. So when I scan and I make an effect, I have to actually ask myself, did I actually make a good change or not?
Right.
Did I actually, or am I just pretending that something happened? Like if it's subtle, I need to know actually, is this real or is this not real? Is this happening or is this not happening?
I don't know what we are going to learn like furthermore. We know the contents that's there in the course, but what I would like to take home from you from the course is like a practice, like
For the fascia?
yeah, for 5 or to 10 minutes, a practice so that you can develop your
Sensitivity.
sensitivity. A short practice because it's very short time to
Yeah.
develop that.
This is just an introduction, right?
Yeah, so
yeah.
I think we will need like something at least 2 to 3 minutes or 5 to 10.
Well, what you can do is you can use the fascia Tensegrity series as your structure for developing what we're talking about. So you can look that's the best way with Michelle. You look for what's like, if someone's doing one of the series movements, what's not moving, what's moving, what, if there's something that looks restricted, what else is there, and so the way to
right too, what's happening.
Yeah, so the way to start with it is like think Tensegrity, and can I see Tensegrity being expressed in this person doing the Tensegrity series? Because if you do the Tensegrity series all the time and you're teaching that, then you'll have a big reference for what you'll start to get, that intuitive feeling for this isn't quite right, like the glide in that hip isn't quite right. Where's that coming from? And then you start that honesty. What is happening there? But I think honesty was the first step I had to do, because I really had to get that feedback. Like, am I affecting what I think I am? And there was a tendency in the very beginning, not a tendency, but I noticed that there was a thing that can easily pretend that something's happening when it's not. And so that is critical. Even today when I scan, I'm still not like, it's like I trust it, but it's like, I'll still check other ways. I'll try and get more points of information rather than ever saying, oh, I know. Like I always want to be like, is this right? Is that it? I always want to be asking and checking, not from a lack of confidence, but more to know that it's actually true.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this.
It's a very good question. I don't even know how we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I just think because the rest of the
It was ball rolling versus the
Oh,
rolling.
yeah.
That's the first
Yeah.
question, and
my question is
Yeah, how to develop that sensitivity.
Right.
because I have observed like over the years that intellectually developing, like understanding and actually realizing or like
The nice format is if you embody the Tensegrity series, if you embody that, then you will see in others what is happening. to a subtle level.
And then the more and more you work with it, the more.
That can be your format, right? So my format's the fascia, you know, what my medium is the fascia. So movement, I'm not fantastic at moving. I can see in others, but I don't, my medium's the fascia. So it's that felt sense of what's going on.
Because
And that's
back home we also have like that person, like there's a rishi or a swami, that it's a title for people who they're in the spiritual life. So what he did was he just touch, like the pulse, the doctor takes the pulse, so he just senses this and he goes, okay, you are like the doshas, you know about the dosha? So okay, you have this dosha and then this is your issue, you need to do this, and just by the touch.
Very efficient.
Wow. So but it's a science, it's nadi Vigyan, it's like nadi astrology something. But they do just touch, and they're not feeling the pulse, but they're feeling the energy channel.
More than just.
So I personally feel a sense of touch is like very important, and back home nobody asks you, can I touch you? It's just,
Exactly.
It's not this way, it is this way.
And that's what's tricky here, right? That's tricky. I remember in the old days of yoga, like when you were there on your back, Shavasana or whatever, they would come and they would just, you know, just one little touch, right? That touch, if you were allowed to do that, could give you all the information, right, of the system. But we can feel it from a distance too. But that touch,
I don't know, me specifically, I like just in anything, like even cooking, drawing, anything that I feel touch is very important. As a human. So that's very important.
And I'm not sure how to introduce that. That's kind of what the balls are for, right? That's the closest we can get for a touch without touching.
But I think what you're saying too is like feel it in your own body too. Like try to, right?
If you embody the series and you know those really well, you will feel more when you see someone else.
Right. Yes. And then get more of a sense. What's happening.
And it's good to study anatomy.
It's good. Yes.
So the more you have, it's just another, you know. So some people will know nothing and they have strong intuition and they can do great work. And I think it's better when we have the knowledge as well as, if we have just the knowledge and we don't have the sensitivity, it's not so great. It can be okay. But when you have the two together, that's the best. Because you have to know what's possible in order to see what's happening. And sometimes that requires details. So, oh, we're so close. That's time. Right.
She said she had a place where yoga sessions. But I'm new to this thing.
Okay. So retreat. I've been to a retreat with Sean Holman. It was a women's gathering. Were you there still? At Riverstone? No. I mean, maybe. No, I mean, it was down this, the directions really down this road.
Okay. Time to start. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start back up. We're missing a few people that are getting extended coffees. But we'll make do, and it's all recorded anyway. So, okay, on the break, I got a couple of good questions that I just want to share with you. And so one question or idea was around the ball rolling and how that is different than like fascial, like direct manipulation, like what I do. And So with the ball rolling, one of the, what that made me think of is when I've seen people rolling on the hard rollers, say on the IT band. So I'll just show you. So just up through here on the IT band, and you see people rolling with the hard roller and their face is grimaced and they're in pain, you know, and they're like forcing it, and they get up and they feel better for about 2 minutes. It doesn't last. And so that's one way of kind of influencing the fascia. It does influence the fascia. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's a very, very like a directive, not listening kind of way of affecting the fascia. And then another level is where we have like the soft balls, the air balls that we see more in yoga therapies, and I really like those. I like those a lot. And again, a lot can happen when the ball is being used in a way where there's a lot of communication, internal communication happening, and little subtle movements are being felt. And so you're developing that communication with the load on the fascia and how that's influencing the rest of the structure. And working that way, that can really make quite a lot of change in the fascia. I've seen that do enormous work with the fascia. So that's a very, very good tool for working with some of these spots we're looking at, influencing them. And also what I like about the air ball is that when you have tissue and it's being compressed because you're putting your weight on an object, if that object's hard, and then you've got something on the other side of that tissue, like a bone that's hard, now your tissue's in between two hard things. And if there's too much forcefulness used in that, then you can actually irritate the tissue. So you can damage the tissue if you go too much. So there's stories of people hurting their bursa on their hips when they roll really hard. So I like the air balls because they don't ever set up a situation where things can't move out of the way if they need to.
Just to stop there, could it cause inflammation?
The hard stuff could, yeah. Oh, yeah. You can actually hurt yourself with the hard rollers. Now saying all that, you could possibly use a hard roller if you're listening and do a good job. On this specific example of the IT band, just to drop in just for one example. So we have the IT band, and then we have the quadriceps segment and the hamstrings. The actual place that I affect the IT band is at the back in the femur. And because the tissue of the IT band will come out from here and then wrap around. So it's very, very rare that I ever work directly on IT here in order to affect change, because it's just not that effective. I can get much more effect if I make sure the IT band is free to slide and glide from the hamstring compartment and the quadricep through the septum there. So I work more the septum, the areas between these big compartments, primarily at the back, because that's the origin of where the tissue will come out. So that's just a little detail. Sometimes I'll work the IT band when there's actually scar tissue in the IT band, but most of the time, when something is short or something, you know, that we feel like we need to stretch, it's that slide and glide. And so then we look at the big compartments of the leg, the septum, which is a fascia in between those compartments, and we want that to slide and glide. Yeah, so you can, you know, that's just an example. There's lots of little details.
Would you say that's the same for like the fascia blaster?
The fascia blaster, that's actually trying to initiate inflammation, I believe, right? It almost seems like it has a different purpose.
Yeah, they say it's to remove like cellulite because you're breaking the fascia, and then you have
Through
smooth
inflammation, yeah.
Yeah.
What was really interesting, Schleip brought it up in a video that I think Michelle will share with you, because the woman that created that's getting sued. And now I don't think what she's doing doesn't work, like for the purpose. Like it seems like maybe it does, you know, inflammation can clear out stuff. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. But what happened for some people is it would bring back some of the viruses that they had, or like, you know, that were things that were latent in the body, the immune system had managed to control, like it would stir that up again. So people were getting, you know, repeats of things they dealt with in the past by stirring the fascia up in that intense way.
It's funny you
So it
mentioned
was
that.
influencing the immune system essentially in a way that maybe was too much for the people.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that's exactly how Ayurveda looks at fascia, is that they work with it, not, you know, obviously in a different technique than Rolfing, but they work with it manually. But the number one thing that they do is make sure that they almost are on a detox protocol because of what comes out during the process of the manipulation.
Yeah.
Have you had that conversation, or have you seen that with your clients with what you do, of like stuff coming up or being cleared out or detoxing?
I rarely see anything now because of the way I work. Because when I'm assessing the body, I'm also listening to the nervous system. So the nervous system will say, hey, I've had enough, and I'll stop. So I don't really see that now. Like early on in my practice, I would see more of that. So more, you know, release something and opens up a whole can of worms, and then we've got to kind of, you know, take care of that. Now, when I work, it's like what I was talking to you about earlier about that integration piece. I don't take things all the way. I take them to where I feel the body can take over. And then that's more like a felt sense. So more is not more necessarily, you know, in the field of fascia. You just want to get it to where the body can start to self-regulate around that area and do all the repair itself. And then if it's doing that, it's not going to have a massive detox because it's going to be going at the rate that's okay for it.
Right. What would you like how would you, or how would you share what you notice with the nervous system? I'm just curious about that, like what you see or how you know what the body shows you in that sense.
Yeah. The primary thing with the nervous system is something that's hard for me to share with you today. I can tell you what I do, but it involves touch. So when I'm touching someone, I listen to their nervous system through touch, the medium. That's where I get the, you know, like the sense of what they're struggling with in their body. I'll see as well. And, you know, like that example of what's not moving. You can feel the nervous system from a distance without touch. And so that would be a felt sense. Sometimes, like if I do a simple example, you know, it's much more complex, but a simple example that I liked early on, and you can kind of feel this from a distance as well, is if you shake hands with someone, it gets to a point when you just know there's time to let go. You can kind of feel it. And so it's that idea, like there's a time where it's like, we're done. You get a feeling in your own body, we're done, it's done. The system needs to be left alone now. So it's not always, I don't always need to touch to get that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like everything in this, you know, it's being repeated in so many different ways, that working with fascia, not that it's intuitive, but it's just you have to listen and look very carefully over and over and over and over again, and let that be your teacher through the process.
Yeah. And that brings us to a nice point. Another question that came up was around what you're talking about. Like, how do we even develop that skill set? And for me, when I started developing the skill set, what I had to do in the very beginning of working as a rolfer was get really honest with myself. And by getting honest with myself, it was like, am I actually affecting change? Is what I think happening? So that feedback loop, if you can figure out a way to develop an honest feedback loop, then you'll develop. But it requires that real honesty. It's like, oh, I might want to think I'm making change. You know, this person just paid me money to fix them, and I might want to think that I did a good job. But it's like, did I actually? You know, and if not, what didn't happen, or what isn't working? So that honesty is really important in being able to perceive what's happening, because that allows you to that, and just being being okay not knowing, those two things. So that's that kind of inquiry or curiosity. Being okay, someone's come in to see you, being okay having no idea what you're going to do with them. And so I know it might sound a little strange, but that's every session I do, that's what allows me to be open to seeing what's actually happening, is by not presuming that I know what's happening. And so there's that, like, that honesty of feedback and being okay not knowing what's about to happen. It's not that it's necessarily comfortable, that feeling. That's how I work. Not everyone needs to work that way. I'm just speaking personally. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. It's that your client is the expert, not you. That you're
Well,
having.
yes, yes. All of the wisdom is in the person's system. Can I connect with that? So often, you know, in the very beginning, and this is what I love when I feel for the nervous system. The very beginning, when I work with someone new, the most important thing is to build trust. And trust is not like, oh, verbally you trust me. Trust is like, oh, your nervous system trusts that I'm actually going to listen to it. And so that I find is the most important thing. So even the first session, the first thing I do is I touch on the area that is like tight, short, that is like the root of the problem. And I don't even have to work it. So it's like, oh, there's something here. And if I find that, then their system's like, okay, there's trust. And then we just keep developing that. They know that they can be safe with my contact. They know that I'm not going to do anything that's going to basically be threatening to their nervous system, right? And so then when that's there, then the communication channel can just be so much better. So that's a precursor for good communication back and forth. We're getting a little off, like, you know, direct talk, but I think it's all important, you know, just, and it's all translatable to yoga therapy, of course, right? I'm sure you've already been covering topics like this. Yeah, I hope that answers your question there.
Yes, thank you.
And then what came up on the break around that as well was that, you know, how do we develop this sort of sensitivity? And for this class, I think, and what I've seen with Michelle, and you can ask her a lot more questions, is when you do the Tensegrity series and you do it and you drop deep with that and you embody that series, the more you embody that series, the more you connect with it. When you perceive another doing the series, you're going to just see so much more. You'll just see what's happening for them as you go deeper with the series. So that information that we're talking about, like how do you gather information, how do you build trust, and all of that, you can use the Tensegrity series as a means or a vehicle for creating that structure in order to develop that. That's just my thoughts. Okay. So there's no more. Oh, Inga, yes.
To be honest, I have not heard of the term rolfing before. Like before, I guess before last night was the first time I heard it. And so you have mentioned, you know, you do this a scan with the light touch, but could you possibly talk about the techniques that you use after, like once you have discovered the areas that need to be addressed? What the techniques of touching, is there anything specific that you do?
Thank you. That's a great question. To start with, I'd like to say that I'm a rolfer, but I don't rolf necessarily like other rolfers. So there's a big variation in practitioners. So when I scan, I didn't actually train that from anyone. That's just something that's come to me over the years of trying to ask that question and being honest. You know, what's happening for the person? How do I know when I've treated what's done? How do I know when to move on? Just being really honest with those questions. So that's my answer to that. You know, develop that very organically. So just to provide that reference that Rolfers don't always work the way I work. When we work with any of the fascia, it does feel like a conversation. And I'm looking for the pattern of the fascial strains and looking for what's getting in the way of nice, easy movement. So some of that will be feeling the quality of the tissue. The fascia is so variable that there's so many different qualities. You know, sometimes you could feel like, if you're able to touch the tissue, you might be able to feel like it's dry, or you might feel like it's sticky, or you might feel like it's granulated, or you might feel like it's puffier than it should be, or you might feel like the adhesion might be like, it feels more like a ball of tissue, you know, that kind of spaghetti left too long. I'll use like, I'll make contact and I'll like, you know, all the superficial fascia can slide over the hip on this side. I touch this side, it's not sliding, right? So it's like, oh, we want that function. We need that function of the superficial fascia to slide over the deep fascia. So that's all tactile inputs. If I felt something like that, so to go back to technique, we can use, and this is one way that manual therapy will be a little different than an air ball, is that I have 2 points of contact and I can surround in 3 dimensions. So as a manual therapist, I have a little bit more tool-wise than say a ball, but that's just, so when I make contact, I can make contact that's very focused, like narrow contact. I can encourage through pressure. So when I make contact, I'll want to sink down to the layer that I feel like I need to work on. And to get deeper in the layer, this is, I think you were saying, Michelle was saying that you follow the tissue. So to get to the deeper layer, if that's where it's at, it's not more force. It's more about intention and awareness dropping to the layer you want to work on. Once you connect with a layer at a base level, then you'll stay with that layer and you'll encourage the movement that it can't do, or you will go into ease where you'll support it so that you wait for it to move and then you follow its movement. From a more practical point of view, when I'm working, I'll use my fingertips, I'll use my thumb, I'll use my elbows. I'll work with nerves and I'll work with the fascia both, because I'll feel the nerves. They'll be like buzzy if they're unhappy. So if I'm working, let me come back here. If I'm working on an arm, well, this is good. I've got a scar here that I could work on. That's an old scar of mine. So it's hard with one hand, because what I would want to do is I'd want to hold it in one place so one area of it wouldn't move. And then I can, so anchor, and then I can start teasing the tissue away. So this is like detailed work where I'd be opening up a scar. But really I could do it with one hand if I anchor with one finger and then tease here. So I'm teasing the tissue. With scar tissues, you can be a little bit more random with the directionality, because you're really just trying to, I don't know, I don't think breakup is the thing. You're trying to just put a lot of directionality into it because it's too rigid in one direction. So you're trying to disrupt that so new collagen fibers can lay down new tracks. So this is an example, one technique where I'd anchor and then I would move. So when you think about it from yoga, a lot of the yoga is going to be doing like long chains, right? But just say I had like a long chain in a movement, but I had an adhesion that was very localized. If I try to do a long chain movement to impact this local area, I can't really get enough input here for the long chain. I can't get enough information here, or if I can, it might be slow to really move if it's adhered in a big way. So if I can anchor one area so that my work is more concentrated, it's like if I could pin the tissue somewhere here and then work it here. The quality will be, if it's adhered, it will feel like it doesn't have the elasticity. So as I anchor on a local area and I pull away, it will feel more like rigid strands of tissue that don't keep going when I pull on them. And so what I can do is I can encourage them along their length. If I feel like that's not working, I can come in perpendicular to their length and start lifting up. I can lift up layers with the contact, like separate layers from going under and up a little bit, grabbing the tissue. So that's just a couple of examples. Sometimes the contact will be more like a ball where I'm using an elbow and I'm loading into an area. And I'm just doing little tiny movements, waiting for change. Little tiny movements, waiting for change. Or I could be loaded in an area, like that could be kind of more of an anchor. Then I could ask for movement on the just say I was on a elbow here. And then I could ask for movement in the elbow to get all the different layers sliding on each other as I was making contact to the adhesion. So you could do things like that too.
That's why you say super different than other golfers, because I've heard golfers will take their elbows.
Well, old school rolfing was more of that direct information where it's like, I'm telling you what to do. Whereas I lean a little bit more towards the osteopathic side of things, where it's like, I'm looking for the easiest, least painful way to help you resolve what is at your core. So that's my framework. So it's just a little different. Yeah. The rolfers? So the question is, say again?
So basically, say that if it's something if something's paining here,
Yeah.
but it might start somewhere else.
Yeah.
So is it like your way is like more finding the roots to the cause?
Yeah, so the way I work, question is, am I looking for more the root to the cause if the root is somewhere else? And the question to that, the answer is yes. So that's why we kind of look at it from a tensegrity point of view. But I would like to say, if there was a root cause to something like a root adhesion and we felt the pain elsewhere, in my experience, we still have to treat both. We have to treat what the root problem is, and we have to treat all the adaptation that's happened since then. If I treat just the root problem, the adaptation won't necessarily let go. So it really has to be both. Yeah. Okay. So coming back into here, we have the fascial system, connective tissues. So this is like the fascial system is a subset of the connective tissues. That's what I call the soft connective tissues. And what I think is starting to happen really is whether we're looking at fascia or the fascial system, where essentially fascia is just a small expression of the fascial system. But I really think this might start incorporating the nervous system more and more and more. There's all the free nerve endings embedded all through the fascia. I think it's going to be harder and harder as we go along to say, oh, this is fascia and then this is nervous system. When you get all the little nerves within the fascia, it starts to look like, oh, it's kind of more the same thing. It's all part of the same thing. So we can say that fascia is the organ of structure of the human body, as it, has a large effect on the shape and the movement of the body. And that's what we've seen in some of the videos. Any kind of tension in the fascia, any kind of imbalance anywhere in the fascia will pull on the system, pull on the musculoskeletal system, right? And this is just a repeat of the fascia as the soft tissue component of the connective tissue. So we're just a little bit of repetition here with these terms. And then we're looking at it. You can imagine the fascia as that continuous tensional network for the whole body. And so we have the bones as the struts and the fascia is like creating that tension for that tensegrity system. And so we have it made up of cells, fibers, and ground substance, which we've covered. We have loose and dense connective tissue. The loose connective tissue is going to be more with the adipose cells, more of the fatty stuff. And the dense is going to be dense either regular or irregular. They used to think the irregular is more like at the dermis layer, subcutaneous, I guess. The dense, regular, they used to think there was irregular in the deep fascia, but they later realized that the deep fascia was regular, but it had direction in different directions, and it was layered and stacked. So really, it's more like dense. They can still call it dense, irregular, or regular, but it's all about having a directionality to how the force is expressed through the fascia. And in some areas of that deeper fascia, it's created in a way where the force may be in different directions. And so it supports all those different directions. Whereas if you're looking at like a tendon, like, the Achilles tendon or something like that, there's a real direction to that. It's like, no, it's just the force is really going in that one direction very, very clearly. So the loose connective tissue has a role in acting like it's creating like cushioning for the body, for the different surfaces that can slide and glide. All the adipose actually stores energy as well. And so we'll get a lot of loose connective tissue throughout the body, supporting different areas so that they can be slightly cushioned. The dense connective tissue has a much higher level of collagen and elastin within the fascia matrix. And that's what gives it that real strength. And so they work in conjunction with each other, the collagen and the elastin, so that we get the strength, but we also get that ability for it to stretch. And that's what we really want in healthy fascia. We really want the healthy fascia. If you feel healthy fascia, what I encourage everyone to do, if you have a younger person in your life that you're in close contact with, if you feel their tissue anywhere, just on the arm here, you'll feel this. You'll feel a quality. The hydration is just so good. It's so perfect, and it will. The feeling if you touch a younger person's arm. But like if you touch your arm now, you can kind of feel like there's the skin, and if you roll it a bit more, you'll feel like the superficial fascia rolling on the deep. And they feel like they're, you can feel the distinct layers, and that's nice, right? And it might be more hydrated or less. But when you feel a younger person's fascia, it almost feels like it's all one thing, which is lovely. They have the different layers, but the hydration is so beautiful, and the interaction with the different layers is so integrated that there's much more continuity of the layers is what I find. And to me, that's more, that's the sign of the healthy fascia. That's an example of what we really would like. So the hydration is really important in the fascia. That's what we want to feel. When it gets dry, then we really want to encourage that hydration. It's so important for the health of the fascia, is that there's good fluid flow in and out. That's really, really, really important.
Brett?
Yes, Inga.
Do you find that the loose connective tissue is closer to the skin than the dense, or they're all really just interconnected?
Well, you can have loose connective tissue around the organs as well, I believe so. Or it's supporting, mostly close to the skin. Yeah, it's that fatty layer. Yeah.
Okay,
and then,
thank you.
It's not a layer that I work with very much, because there's not a lot I can do with it. So, we had that example of the fascia blaster that's working more with that layer. I don't work with that layer that much. Like, I'm working with the superficial and the deep. But in my experience also, there's not like a couple of layers. It's like many, 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 many layers. And so when I'm dropping in, I might be dropping in and then dropping in, then dropping in, then dropping in. So it's not like just 2 layers or 3 layers, like it's described. Yeah, so that's one I don't work quite as much with because I'm not quite sure what I can't affect it as much, I guess, because it's got less of the fibers in there. I can't have as much of an effect with manual therapy. That's where something maybe, maybe more like lymphatic drainage, which I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable on lymphatic drainage, but something like that might have even more effect. I'm not sure. Like where you're just doing more fluid exchange. So a lot of the work that I do is working with more of that, the anything that's not sliding and gliding is kind of what I'm feeling for. But mostly it involves more of the collagen fibers that are adhered to each other or something like that. Or different layers of the fascia that are adhered to each other. And so then we've got the dense connective tissue, it does a lot to transmit force in the body. And it's quite amazing at doing that. So that just tremendous forces can be transmitted when it's distributed and also going through the dense connective tissue when it has that elastic quality. It's like it can go under tension and then it can release. And that's just remarkable how high that can be. I think I'm going off memory right now, but I think Robert Schleip analyzed, and I could be incorrect, so don't quote me on this. He analyzed the tendon structure and compared it for humans and compared it with, was it kangaroos? And it was like a similar, it's not like we can hop like kangaroos, but we have a massive capacity within the tendon structure for that elastic recoil when he did a comparison. I can't remember all the details, so you have to excuse me for that. But that's an area that's really exciting to me when we're looking at fascia, is that elastic recoil, that feeling that we can get in our bodies, where we can load up the whole tensional network and then release it in a directionality, have directionality within the whole system for that. I find that's pretty interesting field. The whole spring in your step, all of that kind of expression that we see in people. So the fascia goes everywhere, it's in all the different parts of the body. It's wrapping everything. It's separating everything. And so when I use fascia as my medium, what that allows me to do is to travel, is to influence other systems of the body. And I think that's why I'm able to influence the nerves, because they're so intertwined with the fascia. So I think that's just a natural progression with working with the fascia over time. So we're looking at fascia. It's including, I like to include the ligaments and the tendons when I say what fascia is. There were some references where they wanted to keep those separate. But that's where I put them all into the definition of soft connective tissue. So for me, they all are part of what I work on. I work with the fascia and they definitely come up a lot, ligament or a tendon. I'll see a lot of ligament stuff around the relating to the plantar fasciitis. That's a good one for us to talk about. Do we want to just drop into plantar fasciitis for a little bit, just to ground the knowledge? So, yes. Yeah, I'd call that fascia. An aponeurosis fascia, like a thickening of fascia. Yeah. So if I look at the feet, so one of the things I deal with is plantar fasciitis. Pretty common. A lot of people come in and then they get told to roll on it, right? Plantar fasciitis is inflammation of the plantar fascia, right? So what's that coming from? So what I find is usually it's a blood flow restriction issue. That's primarily, so if we've got a blood flow restriction issue and we're just rolling on it, maybe it'll work, but if we don't address the blood flow, you know, it's not really gonna help it as much as we'd like. So here, do we have my foot? No, we don't. Maybe I'm too far away for the foot, right? Yeah. Let me come here. Okay, so here, foot, toes. Inflammation in the plantar fascia is what people will come in. And if you feel down here, yeah, it'll be messy. Like it'll be scar tissue, adhered, knotty. Like talk about, you know, we're talking about knots before. This is one place I actually will find like massive knots, like that aren't related to bone structures. Crazy. And if you think, you know, we've got our whole weight, it's distributed, but you know, there's so much strain in the bottom of the foot there, right? Just wild. And so when I treat that, I will work on influencing the ligaments and the nerves through the medium of the fascia, right? Like Robert Schleip says, through the medium of the fascia, primarily through here, medial and lateral condyles here. So right through there's a nerve that has to travel, an artery and blood flow has to travel through up here. And then on the other side as well, the outside. And I'll treat that before I treat the bottom of the plantar fascia. And we want to get that circulation there. So often what will happen, and this will happen with a strain in the, anyone that's twisted their ankle or something like that, right? Then it'll be like, you know how we were talking about the Tensegrity where it's like under pre-tension? What will happen is when we roll our ankle or something, the ligaments on the side that went short will get extra pre-tension on those ligaments. And so they will, that will create tightness that's going to restrict the blood flow and going to impede the nerves there.
So you work that area, so you're working like from here.
Yeah, so I'll manually go either with length or go across, or like I'll hook onto a ligament a little bit and just traction a little and then release and then bring it back, traction a little. I'm wanting everything to just be able to slide and glide. And then sometimes when I'm doing something like this, then they'll feel heat coming through because of the blood flow as increasing. I won't work the arteries directly because that's too dangerous. I'll work the tissue close to the artery. If I ever feel the pulse, or I'll be working area, then suddenly the pulse of the artery can be felt where it couldn't be felt before because the tissue's opened up enough.
So as a yoga therapist, what can we do then? Can we
Well, if you're rolling on the bottom of the foot, you might want to speak to get people to feel what is happening there for them. You know, if you're lifting or not, is it a still point? Right? If you see them moving, like, does it look really still on the lateral and medial aspects of the ankle? Like, so they're focusing on the bottom of their foot, but what's happening at the ankle there, which creates, you know, the opening for everything, for all the blood to come in. Yeah. So that's just one example. Yeah. Okay. And so the fascia includes the some of the tissue of the skin, and then the dense planar tissue sheets of the body. So we get the, you know, big sheets like the thoracolumbar fascia, a few structures like that. So they really have their own role in the body. They can hold like tremendous amounts of force. Often, if I'm working with something like that, it's very common that I'll come in on the side and lift. There's a lot of structures. A lot of people get manual therapy where the force gets, you know, they lie face down and they get pushed on the back. So if someone comes in, I usually know they've already had a lot of that. And if it's still an issue, what I want to do is try and separate the layers. So I'll come in on the sides a little bit and do more of a lifting of the fascia because I'm trying to lift one layer off another layer. Yeah, just manually. There's Andy, his question. There's no volume, sorry.
I thought I unmuted, but I didn't. So with that lifting, is that similar to like when people do cupping, like where you're kind of pulling?
Cupping would lift. Cupping would lift. It's probably lifting a more superficial layer. Because what I would do is I'd drop in and then lift on a deeper layer. It might, like cupping would have to grab all the layers to lift it, the deeper one. Whereas I can drop straight through the more superficial layer, go to a deeper layer, and then lift that by this kind of scooping action. With all of it, it's like it's just I don't even think about it now after so long. But in the beginning, I had to really focus on finding a layer and staying on that layer. So as a beginner rolfer, there's a real tendency to get on a layer and then like leave that layer and go on another layer and come down the layer. So, you know, I'm doing a stroke, but it's like all these layers as I do it. So that was like the first thing to learn was to, when you find a layer that's important, to stay on that layer. If that's the layer that needs to slide and glide, right? And so I imagine if you do ball rolling or something like that, you know, you could speak to that piece of if someone looks like they're, you know, popping up and down on layers as they move, you could probably speak to that and really bring the attention to, like, once you find a certain layer, you want to feel for that quality as you move through. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So, you know, what's the use of fascia if it doesn't have all these fun functions, right? So the whole thing is that expression. That's what we're after with the fascia. It's not for me to tell someone, you know, how they need to be able to move or anything like that. It's more like, you know, how can I help you express yourself how you want to, right? So it's like, I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to support you so you can do what you want. That dog looks like he's doing what he wants. Sorry for all your cat lovers out there. So we're looking at, I just want to stop for a sec. Do people need a break? Oh, okay. 2 people are moving their car, so I'll just keep it. I would like to do a break. We're going to stop at 12 to end the slide. So I'd like to take a break in about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. Is that okay with everyone? Or is everyone tired and they want a break right now? Can we go another 10 minutes and then we'll take a break? Okay. Only one break. Okay, well, let's see how we go. Okay. I think let's do a little break. Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. So fascia, the functions of fascia. This is important. Let's go through all of this. So we know this first one, right? We know that fascia creates that continuous tensional network for the expression of tensegrity in the body. Super important. That's, like I was talking last night, it's like that's what we really thought the primary function of fascia was in a way. Like that's the big deal, right? It provides the sliding and gliding environment for all of the organs and the muscles. And so when you get fascia wrapping something, then something else will slide on that. And what we see is it's like, it'll wrap a whole section, but within that section, it will wrap another little sections. And within those sections, it wraps littler sections. And so you have all these wrappings of fascia on the different dimensions of size of an area, and they're all sliding on each other. And so we can have a full, you know, segment of muscles, and then single muscles, and then fibers within muscles, and there's fascia around the bones. The fascia around the bones is really interesting. The periosteum layer of fascia, it's innervated as well. An example of that, just to ground it, what can happen for teenagers when they grow quickly is the periosteum around the tibia isn't able to keep up with the bone growth. And then they'll experience like shin splints, that kind of thing. And I can come and work with an adult and they can still have that periosteum still a little too tight. So then I have to drop through all the other stuff and get on the periosteum layer, right? And then drag across that layer. So there's just so many different ways of affecting fascia. There's so many different layers of fascia. Yeah. Sometimes what I do, not a lot, sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually use like, have you heard of that term for in Chinese medicine, gua sha? The bone tool. So they use that to work the superficial layers of the tissue, of the skin, to bring blood flow. I'll do something similar with the back of my nails. When I'm working with some people, I'll use the back of my, like if I need a really thin layer of fascia to open up, it's not a big chunky one, it's a little fine, thin one, I'll use the back of my nails sometimes just to try and grab a really thin layer of fascia and get some movement in there. It doesn't hurt. It's not like I'm grabbing or digging in. It's not like that. It's more just it's like the gua sha technique. So there's, different qualities throughout the body of the fascia to work on. The fascia is important to segment different structures of the body. So when we look at the organs, like the visceral organs, and then we look at the thorax, we have the different fascia bags separating those two, but they're close to each other. It's like if you have whenever you've like got something on the counter that has a little bit of water under it and it's flat, you can't pick it up. So I think is it tugur or something they call it? You can't pick it up. So because they're attached this way, but it can slide. So you'll slide it off and then grab it up, right? So the visceral bags need to slide on each other. Let me get up and show you. So the fascia of the belly bag, the visceral bag here, and the fascia of the thorax, this will apply to organs as well, but this is sliding next to this one. This one's holding this one up because that suction happens, but it's sliding at the same time. So this is being held up through here and it's sliding. So that's one big purpose of the fascia. With the lungs, we have the bag of the lungs on the right, we have the bag of the lungs on the left, and then we have the mediastinum in the middle, the bag of the heart as well. And so we need to, when we twist, when we turn, these big layers of bags need to slide on each other. If they're not sliding, if I'm doing something like swimming and that bag, the lung bag's not sliding on the other bags, I'm not going to be able to move properly. I'm going to be really restricting my movement. I'm going to think it's musculoskeletal, right? But it's really, if someone gets pneumonia or something like that, they can have their pleura and it's not sliding properly. It's stuck, adhered to some of the other tissues. So it's a really big deal. And that's an example of something that can happen that's hard to perceive. But can change quite quickly if it gets the right information. It's the visceral tissue has less of the collagen fibers, so it doesn't have the same strength, but it's really intelligent. So the visceral tissue, or the organ tissue, the stuff that's supporting the suspensory ligaments of the organs, they don't have the same strength as the tendons. They're not that kind of tissue, but the fascia is really, really intelligent. And so with those, what works often really well is to surround, put ease into the area, put support, and then if it unwinds, it really unwinds very well because of the innervation. So that's another function of the fascia. We've got a few more functions. So they provide the ability for the nerves and the blood vessels like to move through and slide. So if I move my arm, all the nerves and the arteries need to be able to, they don't want to get like pinned, right? They need to be able to glide and slide through the movement. And so the fascia is allowing that to happen. So when we get something like a nerve, I don't really call it a pinch. I think of more of impingement or a restriction. Then that can interfere so strongly with movement. And there's some talk where they do nerve flossing. They call it nerve flossing. And it's similar to what I was talking about where you pin and move. Personally, I actually don't like that technique because I find that it irritates the nerve long term. So you can get a good release, but the nerve isn't like really happy about the release. So I find the nerve like is so intelligent that if you can help it just to relax and do really gentle movements without that really like strong directive, like this pin and this flossing is very direct. You're saying, do this. Like you're essentially stretching the nerve. But instead of stretching nerve, if you can help it just to calm down, but find the glide, right? Encourage it in a slightly more gentle way. I find that actually holds a lot better, personally. So that's another function of the fascia. Integrates better. Integrate, yeah. So integration is key. With all of this, whenever we're talking about the fascia, the integration is is so important. And that was one of Ida Rolf's visions with Rolfing, the integration, the importance of integration. And that's why I like to not take something all the way. I want the body to finish the job if it can. Yeah. Because that's the best integration. Okay, it's just almost 1:15. Why don't we just take a 5-minute break, give everyone a little rest, and then we'll keep going. So this is an analog clock, so I can't give you an exact thing, just roughly 5 minutes from now. Okay.
So yeah, I just the nerve flossing thing. So somebody was doing that in another instructor, and like she's done some training on nerve flossing. So I was curious now when you were talking about the fascia too, that so their thing was about, say, for the nerves in the back of the leg. So if you're sitting or standing, you would be, I forget what it is. You either point your foot as the leg goes straight and then flat.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
One or the other. So wouldn't that be moving the fascia though? Not, so they're trying to say don't stretch the nerves, let the nerves glide. But wouldn't that?
That's okay. Like if you're moving yourself and you've got the communication, that's fine.
Right.
Like you could call that flossing, but it's okay. But if you're on a table and someone's not letting it move and they're putting you through range of motion, that's very different.
Yeah.
So like what you're describing, I'm totally fine with that because you're in charge, you're listening, and you're trying to feel for that slider glide of the nerve as you move through. That's what we want.
And then that's the fascia gliding as well, isn't it?
It's the nerve gliding through the fascia. Right, because it's impinged or it's adhered, like the layer of the fascia for the nerve is adhered. Yeah, the nerves have to go through, the nerves have to travel through different layers of fascia. So it's not like a nerve is like, oh, let me just sit at this superficial, like in between superficial and do my job. The nerves go, so they got to find these little holes to get through.
Yeah.
Right? There's little grommets, little air access points for the nerves to go through. And they're everywhere, right? They're everywhere. So this is happening all the time. That's why I think it's hard to say the fascia is not, it's hard to say, here's the nervous system, here's the fascia system. To me, it's getting harder and harder to say that. Yeah. Because they're just like, they're everywhere, you know, like if something is everywhere in something else, like at what point is it not the same thing? It's not the nervous system, it's not the fascial system, it's like the embodied system or something. So.
It's funny, yesterday, I was teaching a class and a lady was saying to me, I said, well, this week we're learning more about fascia. I was telling that. So one lady comes after, she goes, oh yeah, I had a rolfer a while ago and she's totally in pain still. So I don't know when I haven't asked her. She said she did the 10 sessions and she was like, painful.
Yeah.
But I know that that's not what you're.
Yeah, that's right.
You're doing, but interesting that like she's still trying to
Resolve the pain.
resolve.
I don't get everything, you know, maybe I get 80% of things or something like I don't get everything.
Yeah.
But if
But
there's
you don't-
something,
you don't inflict more pain on pain, right? So,
well, I don't want to ever traumatize something like ever, right? But some things are going to be more like out of my realm.
yeah.
Like if you have a bone on bone, your disc is gone, the nerve is compressed, I can't do anything with that, you know?
Yeah.
I might influence the pain response of that, but I can't change that structure. I don't have the tool set. So there's a lot of things that are out of my, if you've got digestive issues that are more like in the physiology and the, like you've got an autoimmune disease, there's a lot of things I can't touch, like I can't influence. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a,
Yeah.
there's limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a practice here?
Yeah. Actually, I should use the bathroom for now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have one here, yeah. And then donkey. Is there someone in here? I can't remember seeing them. Okay.
When I started
Oh, the ginger, yeah, they're fun. Yeah. They're great once you've got them on.
Yeah.
They take longer to put on. And they're left and right sided, so you have to.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes I'm like, really, is it worth it? But then when I've got them on, like, they're great. I like them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're back. Is everyone back? I can't see everyone. Most people look like they're back. Little break. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I thought we could just break it up a little bit and just try standing for a little bit. If everyone wants to stand. And then this was actually, this term is called schmear. I guess it's not a technical term. And it's for, it was coined by, I think she's a physiotherapist. She was in Washington. She did barefoot walking or something like that. And I really liked, so this is not my creation is what I'm trying to say. But I really liked the, and I could dig up the, I think it's Kim Bowman, someone. I really liked her idea of this introduction because it speaks to the fascia. And what it is, you know, we're standing all the time, right? But what happens when we, and that's why I've got you all standing, what happens when we walk? You know, how do we walk? Like, so when we walk, if you feel, when you walk, there's the different layers of fascia are being loaded. Like, how do you propel forward? To propel forward, you're loading the fascia of your foot. So it's getting shear across it, what she calls schmear in this case. In order to move forward, if you feel the bottom of your feet, right? So that's a lot of force that we're feeling. And that force, as we move and walk, is is because the fascia is connected everywhere, that's informing the entire structure of how to engage and activate and hold its tensegrity structure. It's happening all the time, but we take it for granted because we're so used to it, so normal. But there's a lot of this, like if you're just putting pressure back and forth on your foot, like I'm just swinging my pelvis and I'm putting shear on the bottom of my foot, I can feel that. So I'm doing this with my feet. I can feel that fascia getting tugged on. And that's going to refer all the way up the body. Now, what happens if one of your hips is a little out and you're walking? That fascia is going to tell the different muscle groups to fire differently in the body, right? So then we'll get like the hamstrings. Well, the IT band, if I have an external rotation, the IT band is going to become more of a hamstring function. And so that it starts with the bottom of the foot, and we're in gravity, those two together. But as we walk, we're getting that instant input to the rest of the fascial system that's then determining the tone of the firing of the muscles, the sequencing, and all of that kind of stuff. So then one thing's fun, knowing all of that, if you just stand in your just standing pose, a lot of people might stand wide, and they might come into class and they might say, oh, you know, my IT band's always tight. But they're engaging their IT band, they're smearing out this way as they stand. They're activating their system all day long, so that's why that's going to contribute to the tightness. So if we come in to hip width, which is what we hear all the time, and then we have like just soft knees, you know, not hyper, not too bent, just soft, right? And we just feel, just let our body hang. And then start to tune into how is the superficial fascia being pulled on the bottom of the foot. Check your left and your right. If we're neutral, there shouldn't be really any pull at all. If we're getting pulled, then we have some sort of tensegrity pattern in our structure that's not at rest in neutral, right? So for me, personally, I have an injury on my right ankle. I had an accident when I was a teenager. My left foot feels very neutral in the fascia. My right foot, I can feel the fascia has a rotational quality, just as I'm standing here. You do too? And one foot. Yeah. Yeah. It's still there. Yeah. 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 So that's just to bring it back home again, like the fascia. This, you know, we're like, what's this tensegrity? Is this idea? How do we see it? We're living it all the time, of course, but it's like you can tune into it just by feeling your feet, and then you start walking. It's like there's so much information on the bottom of the feet, and that's pulling into the whole tensegrity structure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's crazy how obvious it is and how we don't notice it all the time. But it's a really big deal. If you're looking for balance in your body, that's a really good starting point to have the fascia on the bottom of your feet in neutral when you're standing in neutral.
Even when you
What did you say?
after you said that you need to notice it.
Yeah.
Even it's not easy. It's a hard time.
Hard to notice. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's so obvious, I think. Because it's so close.
I think sometimes what we feel in our bodies is normal as maybe
That's right. Yeah.
behavioral pattern.
We.
Moving in a way that's patterned, but it's not.
That's right. Yeah. So what we feel as normal is not necessarily neutral. So in my earlier days of rolfing, if someone had a hard time feeling their body, sometimes you might release one aspect and then get them to stand again. So they get a big contrast. I don't do that anymore, but early on I might do that just to be like, oh, wow, that's really different. Yeah. Yeah.
That also provides the nervous system with information, right? Allows the brain to kind of integrate.
Well, that's where, so the statement was that provides the nervous system with information as well. for the brain. And I think that's where it's all so enmeshed, right? It's hard to say, oh, this is fascia and this is not nervous system. I think it's both. It can't. I don't know how we separate that anymore. Yeah. So the fascia, it's involved in the more classical understanding of how it works. We've got the ligaments, we've got the tendons, just to get the musculoskeletal system moving and transmitting forces. So we have that kind of classic understanding of the fascia as another function. This is what we spoke about a little bit before, the store and release of kinetic energy generated by muscular and gravitational forces. It's just that recoil effect, the way we can load into our body and then come back, or that spring effect. In the Robert Schleip, in their earlier, they did fascia fit. They created a system called fascia fit, where they were trying to answer the question of how do we look after the fascia. And some of their suggestions were really trying to encourage this elastic recoil. And so they would, I don't know how to show this. So he liked things like skipping, so you have that, you're just really building that elasticity, that expression. And also like if you're doing like something like a push-up or something, instead of like pushing up and holding, it's more like that. You're loading and then springing back. You're loading the system, springing back. So as you drop in, you're wanting to feel the whole fascia, and you just feel like the tension's increasing, like a rubber band, the whole system, and then it comes back. So that, of course, there's muscles involved. It's not that there aren't muscles involved, but we're using the muscles to try to load the connective tissue in a way that we can reclaim that energy. So, yeah, that's why kangaroos are such a good example of that. They're so efficient. Like if you try hopping on both feet to get around, we're not very good at that at all. It's a lot of work, but kangaroos make it easy because of that elastic recoil. They've just specialized that development for their tendons. It's just incredible. It's actually really efficient what they do. So if you're more interested in looking after the fascia fit was something developed by Robert Schleip quite a while ago. I haven't followed it since its introduction, but I'm pretty sure people are still working with that system. So we have even more functions of the fascia. Just keeps going on. It's highly responsive and adaptable. So what that means is like that strolling under the skin video, it's just going to change on the fly. So basically the adaptation. So the fascia is a big part of our ability as humans. Something that we are so good at is adapting, right? And the fascia is in other mammals and of course all of that, but that ability to adapt under load. So that's really it's all in the realm of the fascia, to change the setup so that we are in the best organization for what we're doing. And then ideally, when that load's removed, then we come back to our neutral again. That's what we want in an ideal world. They're saying the fascia, it's the most innervated structure of the body. It has like 250 million nerve fibers. That's an estimate. That's including the superficial and the deep. Has an ability to contract. The contraction has more to do with, I can't remember, like Schleip said it was like the stress hormone, but I don't think it's necessarily a direct pathway. But basically it's got to do with the nervous system, and then the fascia, and then the contractile. It's not a rapid contraction. So the fascia has more like a slow contraction. That's the stuff that builds up over time. And so we'll get that, under stress. We could get like a system-wide contraction over time where everything just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. right? So don't be too stressed. We've got to, we've got to move. We've got to get the fluid going. It's the stuff that I can influence a lot with the rolfing. Is this contraction of the fascia. It seems to do well with manual therapy. You can influence it a lot with the yoga as well. Yeah.
Sometimes when I roll and somewhere in my hand, it feels like it's almost like punching.
So the question is, when someone's ball rolling, sorry, what's your name? Linda, sorry. When Linda's ball rolling, she feels some areas of the fascia, particularly in the hand, that are crunchy. It sometimes, yeah, it could be. Most likely. Sometimes the kind of can be like the tendons, like we're calling that fascia, but like they can be, there's different kinds. Like sometimes the fascia can be gritty. And often I think of that as like a hydration thing. Or, so there's a particular quality of the fascia, that grit, like it almost feels like there's sand under the skin. And that is where I feel like there hasn't been enough movement for a while. We're not getting enough fluid exchange. And so we're getting a buildup of stuff we don't want in there kind of over time. And so then the movement is the best. We just need to get it moving. So that's what I see is that where areas just don't get moved a lot. So we don't have that same hydration. Yeah. To know what's happening, I'd have to like touch pretty much to really give you a more detailed answer. Yeah. Oh, Julia. Hi, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry. Just following up that question and what you just said about like, is it about like drinking, or is it about like drinking water, or is it more about movement? And also, I was wondering, is there like a hierarchy in the system, like in the body, that the water gets distributed like first to that organ and then to the fascia, or the other way around? Or you know what I mean?
Great question. Great question. I think it's not just about drinking, because I think if there's a stagnation of fluid flow in an area, if we drink, it's still going to have trouble getting into that stagnation. I think we need to drink in order to have the fluid available for the area, but we also need to remove the stagnation so the fluid can reach that area. And so some of that is the fascia with the vasoconstriction. So it restricts the blood vessels as it tightens, as it has that contraction. And so then we don't get the same fluid into that area. I think of it, and it's probably not accurate, but I think of it as like, oh, to get fluid into that stagnant area, we'd need more pressure in that area to get that fluid in, because it's going to go elsewhere before it goes there because it's more restricted. I don't think that's like an accurate, it's just like an analogy of what's happening. So when we've got an area there, I think you want to make sure you've got fluids, but the primary thing is to get the movement in the tissue, either through manual, that's where like even like other therapies like infrared, that kind of thing can be really helpful with getting that fluid exchange, getting the movement, the blood flow, right? The blood flow is going to equate to fluid exchange. So we definitely need the movement. We definitely need manual movement, whether that's with a ball, whether that's with yoga, whether that's with exercise, or all of the above. The trick with some movements is it's hard to localize it in the area of stagnation. So that's before why we were talking about like where you might anchor somewhere and then work to open up that area. Does that answer that question? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So with all these nerve endings, the fascia is serving as the primary system for the proprioception. for our feeling of embodied awareness, right? Where we are in space. This is a big, like, where are we? You know, if I close my eyes, I still feel like I can feel where I am. So that's all the nervous system feedback through the fascia. As I move my joints, everything's telling me where I am. So that's the primary purpose of the fascia. Super, super important. Okay. Fascia and trauma. This one gets a little tricky. This is something I wrote when I at some point, I can't remember when, a long time ago, but this is how I view it still. It's still applicable. The fascia of the body tells the story of a person's life. All events are reflected in the fascia, including physical and emotional trauma. So I really feel like the fascia tells a story when we're connecting with it. It's not just this mechanical material. It's so much. There's so much more in that. And it's like, if I'm connecting into something that happened for someone, it's like, oh yeah, that's where the ball hit you, you know, while you were running, talking to whatever. There's a whole story around it. And so that's what, it just makes it fascinating. Hard to connect with maybe without the tactile touch. I don't like the, you know, this fine detail of story in the fascia, maybe, but you can see stories in the fascia with the way people will hold themselves or the way people will move. There can be a story within the fascia that might be visible there. Or you might get to know the story and you're like, oh, that makes sense why I see that, right? Or like I see, you know, maybe someone's has a particular stance and a particular way they move, and then you find out they did ballet when they were young, and it's like, oh yeah, now I see it. Now I see the ballet in you, right? Because it might be like a tucked pelvis or like out flare of the hips and a tucking, and then a tucking in a really particular style of structure that's then reflected. And so the other thing this speaks to is sometimes something won't really move until the emotional piece is, doesn't have to be fully resolved, but at least feels like there's movement in the emotions as well around that. So that's what that speaks to, this statement is that. And as I've been in practice for a long time, I think that's the, I feel like more and more things that I see have some sort of emotional content to them. Now, I don't know how to speak to the science of this. It's just something I feel like I'm seeing as I see deeper. I feel like more and more of what I see is there's emotional content. It's less common that it's just I bump myself on something, and more common that there's more of a story around the whole event. I don't know how to quantify that for you. I think of the fascia, like if there's an adhesion, then we're really dealing with communication of the body. So if we can bring back the communication, this is the beauty of what you're going to be able to offer with this. If we can bring back that communication to the body, then I think a lot of it can unwind. So that's really a way to frame the working with the fascial system is, you know, how do we bring that communication back for someone within that area that they might not quite have perception around right now? So like it's not hard necessarily for people to feel pain, right? People might feel pain, people might feel like something's not working really well. But how do you take it to that place where there's actually real conversation or real communication that's being developed? It's like, oh, that's that because, you know, and now I feel like, oh, I was always holding here, I just never noticed. Or one session that stuck in my mind was where I had seen a pattern where this pattern was happening in someone. And we would treat the fascial lines, just like I've told you, open it up. It would look good out of the session. Next time, a week later, it would look like this again. 5 times, you know, treat it, looks good. Next time, this again. And then we were talking, and we realized together that, so the insight came that when that person went to their car, they had been in a big car crash, so they armored up every time they got in the car. And so then the work was about, okay, before you hop in the car, I want you to remind yourself you're safe, you're secure, you're okay. That was the last time I had to treat that pattern. It never came up again. So that's where there are these other elements that are, you know, how do you find that out? I don't know. You just got to listen, right? Talk. And so I'm not a therapist, like in terms of counseling or anything like that, but it's like, how do you find those little gems in someone's life that's happening for them? Right? So it's just listening. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but just I want to point out that these things happen for a lot of people a lot of the time. A lot of this is not only like, oh, I hurt my back, but I hurt my back when this big family event was happening, right? And so then you can't just treat the back. You've got to include that family event as part of that dialogue that happened, right? I think, to get the full resolution. So if something's not repairing, then there can be that other piece to it. That puts energy into holding that pattern, right? So we have trauma that's locked energy. It takes energy to hold that in. So communication. To restore the fascia back to healthy condition and function, we need to restore that communication. That's what we're looking at. So here's just a little visual.
Sorry, Brett, I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, can you hear me? I wasn't sure whether my microphone
I can
was
hear you
working.
now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I had a question on the previous discussion that you were having. So when we talk about an actual physical injury and there was, I think, a question in one of the assignments about how it does take time if it's a major injury, but it's good to have that movement as well as a few days of rest in the middle to help that heal if it's any physical injury, say anything, a hip or something. So when we consider trauma also, if the person has a bit of a reluctance to movement because of whatever reason, so do we take under consideration the amount of time it will take to heal? It may take a couple of months for them to for the fascia to heal.
Can you reframe that? Are you talking about trauma of the fascia or trauma?
No, I'm talking about the fascia because since we're having that discussion, I'm trying to understand it with the correlation to trauma. Yes.
Like trauma of the fascia.
Yes.
Like trauma of the tissue itself, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
In relation to the trauma that they have experienced. So when we talk about the healing period, what would that be like? Yeah, I hope my question was clear.
Yeah. It's again, it's going to depend on what's going on, but if there's like a whole inflammation response that's happening, it's just not the time to go into the fascia.
Gotcha.
So you do need to let things, like sometimes I'll know that something's going to adhere after a trauma, but I almost need to let that happen and then clear it up. So just say someone injures their knee and then they get all this like adhesion around it. That's the body trying to protect that injury, right? And so we almost need, like, we're not doing the person any favors if we immediately get in there and release it necessarily. It's going to depend on the injury. But I lean more towards letting things bind up first to a certain degree, and then then I might, like I said before, I'm not going to try and get the whole thing done. I might open it up a bit and then see how the body responds. And then open up a bit more and see how the body responds. So what we don't want to do is destabilize an area. And that's the risk. If we go in prematurely, we can destabilize an area. Now, there are studies with scar tissues, like after surgeries, where if they go into the tissue really early, they actually get really good results with the scar tissues with the healing. I don't go in that early, like what's been documented. They go in pretty much straight away. I just don't do that. I don't feel right about doing that, because I just think we've got to get things, we've got to let some of that healing do what it's going to do naturally, and then we'll open it up. So it's more, it's your question is timing, and that
Right.
I wouldn't think of it as like a black and white timing. It's like, now we go full ball. It's more like, I think we're ready to do a bit of unwinding now. Let's see how you respond. Oh, you're good. Let's do a bit more. Okay. But
Yeah,
if
and
it's
I
all
asked this
inflamed,
why.
yeah.
Sorry, and I asked this why is because supposing say somebody, like you said, had an accident. So now we're not only dealing with the injury of the accident, but we're also dealing with the trauma that is associated with the accident. And
That's
so in
right,
that
yeah.
case, yes. And that
Yeah,
is
we can
why I
have-
was trying to understand what was the best approach regarding that.
Yeah, yeah. I think we can have all of that happening. Yeah, yeah. So I like to use the wisdom of the body of the person. So if I do an intervention, then I watch. So it's not unusual for me to be in session and I'll get someone up halfway in the session. It's like, how do you feel when you're in gravity? Like, one of the best feedbacks I can get is not my own sensing, but how do they feel when they're standing in gravity? That's one of the best feedbacks I see. And so I'll do that. Like, I'll just like, walk around. This isn't for me, this is for you. How do you feel walking around? You know, and I'm watching them, but I want them just to see how they feel. And if we get a really positive result, then we might say, that's it. Let's leave it at that today. Or it's like, well, you know, this is better, but now I'm really sore somewhere else. It's like, okay, so we've moved to stagnation, but the tensegrity structure is now expressing pressure somewhere else. So it's like, let's try, when we're doing something like that, we want to get these little bits out of the way so they don't get in the way of the work we've done. So just say you did an intervention with your yoga therapy that treated pelvis restriction, and then they got up off the table and now their neck's sore. It's not that we need to, well, intervene with the neck too much, but we want to do just a little bit so it doesn't block the good work we've done down here. Because if it's too much, then the other stuff might revert back to where it was. So the same when I do an intervention, if someone is now going to exercise afterwards, I say, like, just don't go 100%, like go, you know, less than you normally would. So you're not putting too much pressure on the system and forcing it to revert back to where it was before, because it doesn't have the options. Okay.
Thanks.
So healthy fascia, we're looking at this. This is from Schleip. We're looking at these higher undulations. So this is like that elastic recoil quality. We're looking at the fibers being arranged in, they're aligned with each other. This is particularly what we're talking about here is like the deep or dense fascia, where we're really transmitting a lot of force through the body. So this is more of an example of that type of fascia. This isn't like the fascia of the visceral fascia or the other kind of fascia. So this is more of the stuff that we, you know, more like this directly that we're dealing with often. So if we take someone like a healthy person and we're looking at that fascia, we zoom in and then we zoom in again. This is what we're looking at with the collagen fibers. We want them kind of wavy with the collagen and elastin together. They're organized in a way where they have strength in a certain direction, but they can be stretched and then they recoil back. That's what we're looking at. That's what we would call a healthy, deep aligned fascia. Force is transmitted easily when the fascia is healthy. We have that sense of fluidity and vitality. We have that elasticity. I'm doing a little bit of repetition, but you know, I find when we're learning something new, it's good to keep it somewhat simple and repeat myself a few times just to to get some of these core ideas inside our minds. And then, yeah, like the fascia, when it's healthy, it can really handle the dynamics of everything we're doing, and it can bounce back. So, you know, we're starting at essentially standing in gravity. That's like our neutral. And then whatever we do, it puts different dynamic forces on the fascia. It's got to cope with it, and it's got to come back to standing in gravity and be comfortable in neutral. So that's what we're looking at for a healthy fascia. And then when the fascia is healthy, when we're operating out of the tensegrity framework, that's when we really can avoid the injuries. So the injuries usually happen when we're moving out of tensegrity and go more into like compressive loads and that kind of thing. This guy, you know, he's not doing enough. He's just sitting on the couch. So his fascia, remember that spaghetti that I talked about, where it's like just enmeshed, it's not doing anything? If we don't move, so the fascia is going to form its arrangement based on the movement input largely. So if we're not moving, if we're static, if we're sitting stationary like that, we're not giving the fascia any information. So we're not telling it what we need. We're not telling it what function we need. So if we're sitting in a chair all day and then we go to do something and we're surprised that we don't have that function, we're just not giving that information to the fascia. So it doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know that it should be aligned perfectly. So that's what happens, you know, with an injury, you know, and you don't move it anymore, you get the cast on it. It's the same thing. Like there's no input on the directionality of the fascial fibers, right? And so then it just goes everywhere. It's changeable, right? And the ability for it to change depends on the health of the fascia, like the health of the ground substance. It's not necessarily, the age will influence it just because you know, we don't have the same cellular function and other things like that when we get older. And then if we zoom in, you can see the collagen fibers don't have any of that undulation. So we don't have that elastic recoil, right, in these fibers if we zoom in on any of them. So they're not organized with the elastic quality or the kinetic, the ability to express themselves kinetically. So fibers are all over the place, more undulations. I'm sorry. Here we go. And we lose the elasticity, we get injured easily, everything's harder too. Can you imagine moving around with your fascia all bound up everywhere? It's hard work. So when you see someone and they're really straining to get up and walk or do something, like, it's not unusual, right? That's like, they're probably working really hard. It's just that they're working against so much restriction, right? So, you know. So the compromised fascia is going to adapt by shortening, by thickening, by adhering to the neighboring structures of the body. Movement is key in all of this. I mean, I've talked about a lot of other things, but there's not much that happens that's, you know, without the movement. The movement is really, is probably the most key thing with all of the ways of affecting the fascia. And then once the fascia is unhealthy or bound, then that will tend to keep spreading in a way. The patterning, the movement patterning, once you can't lift a shoulder, once you can't do something else, or just say, you know, people get a lot of, anyone that's got like a restricted shoulder and they're working like in any repetitive way, they'll start to get a sore elbow after a while because the elbow is taking up all the range of motion that the shoulder should be doing. So they should be working together, shoulder, elbow. But once the shoulder gets stuck, you know, after a while, that pattern's going to move into where, oh, now the elbow's sore, right? Or the wrists. And so then, you know, Western medicine might try and treat the nerve of the wrist, right? But really, we need the whole system moving again. It's all about movement. Yes. Yeah, frozen shoulders adhesion through the fascia, but it's a tricky one. It doesn't respond to the light touch very well. The frozen shoulder is a particularly tricky one where it does require like more direct input usually. And what's really unusual with it is often it resolves in a certain time frame, whether it's treated or not. It's a bit unusual. To be honest, I don't quite fully understand all the mechanisms of frozen shoulder. I had one client who had frozen shoulder. Now, I don't know how true this is. And they thought it was a good idea to go water skiing. And they fell off the water ski and it got dragged and their arm got pulled up and it resolved the frozen shoulder. Don't try this at home. So yeah, that one's a little tricky. Yeah. Hi, Michelle. Yeah. So when we're working with the fascia system, you know, when movement's key, it's very responsive because of all the innovation. And so whatever we do to it, it's just going to do its best to respond to the inputs that we're giving it. It wants to do that. So we can just do healthy loading patterns, which is going to be, you know, your yoga movement, like the Tensegrity series. There does seem to be, well, I'll talk about that in a second. So once we start moving in a good way, the fibroblasts are going to, like the collagen fibers will get consumed, and the fibroblasts will lay down new collagen fibers more in the directionality of the input that you're loading to your system. So that's always happening, right? So when I do an intervention, there was some science, like it's about 48 hours for the collagen fibers to really start picking up again. Like the production actually drops in 24 hours and then it lifts up again in 48 hours with an intervention. So there's a lot that's happening on the inside of our body in the fascia after we intervene with a movement, you know, loaded movement pattern. There's a lot of stuff happening for like the next couple of days. And so it's good news, right? We have a way to repair the fascia that way. So one way to work with it is that dynamic loading idea. So it's like, you know, more like, I'm not a big fan of stretching because I think more about, rather than stretching, we're just looking for slide and glide. That's my view on stretching more. But anything where we're that kind of fascia fitness video, which you can look up with Robert Schleip, where you're loading, looking for elasticity and coming back, there's some muscle engagement so that more of the fascia network is engaged. So if the muscles are engaged in a movement, then we're engaging the more of the fascial network as we move. So like as I'm doing this, I'm putting some tension on my hand. I'm moving it through range of motion. I mean, I'm getting much more engagement. I'm going through a nice range of motion. I want my body to be able to do this. So I'm loading this pattern into my system right now. Right. And so then the fibroblasts are going to start working. The collagen fiber pattern is going to start working. So that active kind of loaded movement with end range, with back and forth kinetic, with that kind of springy elastic quality is pretty good for the fascia generally. It likes working in that way. So this is just talking about what I just mentioned, really. So we've got the muscles engaged. It doesn't have to be strong. Like we don't need like a lot of strength in the engagement. It's not that, but if we have some engagement, it's pretty useful. There's an interesting system now. It's called CAR. Controlled articular rotation. It's probably done in old school yoga, and now we've finally figured it out in the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm not
And so controlled articular rotation, CAR. So the muscles of a joint movement are engaged. Everything else is held still, and you put the joint through its range of motion with the full engagement. And so that speaks, what they don't do is the oscillation. They don't do that elastic quality. But what they are doing is they're putting it through range of motion with the muscle engagement. So they are influencing the fascia in a very particular way. And, you know, the innervation is engaged all throughout the rotation. I think if they could incorporate a little bit more of elasticity with it, that would be just wonderful. Yeah, slide and glide, but with a little bit of muscle engagement as well. So those two together. That's right. Yeah. So Michelle was just pointing out with the Tensegrity series, you have the muscle engagement plus the slide and guide, right? And so that's so good for the fascia. And this is a little bit repetitive, but we're just looking at that, you know, elastic quality of the system, encouraging that directionality of the fascia fibers and the undulations. And because we move in all these different directions, it's nice to have a whole lot of different directions that we train, right? So we're just informing the body system-wide to do a whole lot of different things. Great, that's the end of the slide. We're right on 12. Right.
Yeah,
oh, thank you. Linda?
Yeah, I was wondering, because I noticed as I was exercising with the videos provided for this module that most of the Tensegrity exercises are like, well, it's like dynamic, as you said, like it's kind of like that flowing motion and but constantly like moving. And I was thinking about the more traditional style of yoga where you tend to like stay in a pose for a longer time and holding it for several breaths. Is that not as effective for fascia release, or?
It's probably effective in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many different, when you start looking at some of the way the fascia is interrelating, like there's so many different types of nerve endings that are getting information in different ways. When you're in a static pose, you know, for long enough, you'll get that shaking quality, right? That's a lot of movement. So if you're in a static pose, right? And what's nice with the static poses is you're really focusing on the proprioception in terms of alignment. So you're like, no, this, like, especially if you get like some external input on adjustments and then you're held static, then you're really putting a lot of pressure on your system to bring awareness to where you are in space in a really, really precise way. So there's a lot of value in that. And yeah, I think the shaking is a lot of movement on the inside. There's a lot of negotiation that's happening there. Some of that static stuff, you know, the muscles fatiguing. And so as the muscle fatigues, then you're looking at how do I keep in this structure without being biased to one muscle group and that kind of thing. So it is a way of working the system. I don't see any problem with it at all. I think it's pretty good, particularly when it's when you have an external reference that your structure is very well aligned. For the purpose of getting that slide and glide, you know, I'd like to see both happening. I'd still like to see the muscle engagement through range of motion to develop that elastic recoil and the directionality of the fascia. But that's not to dismiss the benefits of a static pose at all. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Good answer.
What did I say?
Yeah.
So that's the end of the slides. You know, yeah, I'll just talk about this picture and then I'll stop and then yeah. This is just like, you know, how like it's back to like our starting point is standing in gravity, right? The gravity is, like we talked before, we're looking at the ball for Tensegrity. You know, maybe if we were living out in space without any gravity, maybe we'd look more like balls, right? But because we have this gravity, it really, really strongly impacts the orientation of our Tensegrity structure for this verticality. So I think of this as our starting point, right? And so we're looking at this is just different. And remember I was saying like different people can adapt so differently, right? So there's so many different ways to walk. There's so many different ways to stand. Some are more efficient than others. Some are going to be more tensegrity oriented, where the load's distributed. Others, they're going to be like focusing on one little area of the body. And then it's going to be, what can happen for people when they're not in tensegrity is that they will rely on the strength of the ligament structure to hold themselves up. So that's an example where someone locks their knees, then they're relying on the ligament structure to hold themselves up. And what will happen is eventually that will give. And so it's not great to rely on just ligaments to hold yourself up. It's kind of, it feels easy, right? But it's actually harder on the body. So, yeah. And so some of these ways of adapting to gravity and standing here in this picture, you know, some of them are going to be driven by the emotions, some of them are going to be driven by the physicality. Some of it's going to have some genetic qualities to it, which we haven't talked on, but different people will be oriented more like extrovert, some people will be more introvert, you know, we'll see some of that in the structures. Upbringings, all those things are all going to influence, you know, so just an example of a few different ways that we can learn to adapt. And we're really, you know, we have that idealized way of doing everything with that tensegrity structure. If you feel like you're spatially adaptable, then you're in a good place. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing.